So what do you call this? This is called what?
So my name is Kieran Hound, and I do pup play. Pup play is within the wide world of BDSM and kink. And I'm also a human.
Yes, you are.
Partial doggo.
So tell me about pup play. Is this a fetish?
So yes, pup play would be considered a fetish. What I love about fetish and pup play, I think as humans, we're naturally creative, expressive people. And we've been like that for thousands and thousands of years. So pup play, while it might look different and novel and alternative to people, it's really the spirit of theater. So humans going back multiple cultures, thousands of years, have embodied the spirits of animals, whether it's in different cultures shamanically, creatively, Shakespearean, theatrical. So what I do is I take the aspects of the canine, so that's playfulness, that's loyalty, that's energetic, that's love, and I channel that through my human spirit. So I make the canine come alive through my play. And it's electrifying, it's fun. As a person, I can often be very heavy and analytical and serious. We take on all this weight as people. We worry about our bills, our jobs, our responsibilities. And what does a dog do? A dog's just happy to be around.
Just wants to play.
Yeah, like if a dog has been treated well, hi, I just met you and I love you. Like what's a golden retriever do? Everybody loves a dog. So for me, what I do pup play, I consider it like emotional support pup playing. For some within our community, it's a sexual fetish. They love kind of taking on this mannerisms of like, I'm this hot, sexy dog. And that's totally valid and beautiful. There's so many ways to express ourselves. But for me, being a very heavy, serious person, when I met my first pup players, it was just like, I was really down at the time. And it was a friend of mine was just coming out to visit for school. And he's like, I met these really interesting people at this bar and like, I'm gonna stay with them, come on over. And I knew about BDSM and kink a little bit through actually seeing pony play, which is like taking on the spirit of the horse. And I was like, I grew up with animals. I love that theatrical playfulness. But I saw these two guys that just had little dog tags on their neck. And I was like, wait, are y'all pup players? And they went from like this to like, oh my God, yes, we're pup players. Like, hi, oh my God, do you want to come hang out with us? Do you want to come to our puppy party? And I was like, what's a puppy party? And they're like, well, we get all our friends coming over and we're all pups. And anytime somebody came to the door, everybody ran to the door barking to welcome them in. I was like, it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. And I learned there was a community for it. I learned there were contests for it where it's just like the most beautiful, silly thing. It's like taking the serious stateliness of, say, like, Miss Universe or like Miss America, where like, okay, it's very vanilla-ish. You have gowns, but you have the wave, you have a platform. It's taking like that structure of being a good ambassador leader, but wrapping it in with BDSM and kink community, where how do you help people bring out their own inner play and light? So often when we see people really dressed up, big and fancy, even if we don't understand it, I think there's always a part of us that's kind of almost like, I don't have the bravery to do that, but I kind of wish I did. But there's something interesting and pulling about it. So I think whether it's pup play or whether it's what any of us do, when we embody that joy in which we find, we kind of give permission to other people to like be creatively expressive as well. And so it's also a joy practice. It's very near and dear to my heart. It helps me alleviate anxiety. It helps me alleviate depression that I deal with. And I've just met so many beautiful, lovely people through it. And I love to talk and share about it. And chase toys, because who doesn't like squeaky toys? It's great.
Well, you can't argue that there's probably not another creature on earth that is as loving and playful as dogs are.
Absolutely. And, if you really consider...
If we all could be a little more like dogs, the Earth would be a better place.
Yeah. And I think about too how as humans have evolved. We've evolved thousands of years alongside dogs. Like there's a reason if you actually see video of how a dog reads a person's face, like they can read points of how the human emotes. And so sometimes people, when they think of pup play, they're like, that's really weird. Like you're not actually a dog, or you think you were born into a dog person. They're like, no. There's only so much you can tell from like trying to look at pictures on the internet to understand anything. It's a theatrical art. How I explain it to people understand what human theater is. You have an actor or an actress who understudy a character, historical, whatever. Now they don't actually think they're that person. With taking on costuming, with taking on mannerisms, roles, accents, they make that person come alive on screen, and so people suspend disbelief for a while to kind of enjoy this character. And so I do that, but with the spirit of the dog. So it doesn't have anything to do with playing with real dogs. That's a weird shadowy side that sometimes people think. No, people don't sexualize real dogs. I grew up myself, I'm an only child, and I grew up with Akitas, Case Hounds, Dalmatians, American Eskimos. Dogs were always very much like my siblings that I never had. And I was a very kind of shy, nervous kid, and I didn't really understand how and why people peopled. But there was a calm, resolute strength and elegance and foundational power about dogs and cats and animals. So I think part of me from like a young age, I was like, I just intuitively understand this mannerism and this way of talking. Because animals really, they talk to us all the time, not through English, not through words, but through their energy, their body mannerism. Yes, sometimes loud bark. They'll definitely let us know. But there's something very pure about that I love that people intuitively connect with as well.
Is it just a way of like connecting and playing with others that's a little more like in the style of a dog, that it's just more kind of free and open? And
foundationally for me, yes.
Because as you said earlier, it's not sexual.
It's not sexual.
It is for some, but not
absolutely
not for you.
And it's, to me also, it very much depends on how you can define sexual. You know, in the U.S., we live in a very sex-phobic culture. So some people will see somebody showing a little bit of shoulder and be like, that's really risque. That's very sexual. It's just a shoulder. All the way scanning to, okay, well, you have penetrative sex in porn. It really depends on how somebody defines it. So outfits themselves, like gear, is not always sexual. And I would actually say it depends on the person, how they're expressing themselves. So yes, so being a part of the pup community, which is a subsect of BDSM and Kink, it also has much foundational history in the LGBTQ queer community. Kink has been a radical way of kind of taking back ownership of very creative sexuality and creative expression. And it's also important for like me to honor that history. It's yes, people make it their own, but there's also a lot of tradition in this. Like we go back to the dog's personality. Dogs also usually have jobs as they've evolved along people. They love being of service. You know, you have working dogs, you have search and rescue dogs, you have service dogs. And pups, or pup players, or pups as they're known, often have like a long history. Some people can be in power exchange relationships with partners. So say like they might have an owner or a master or a dom, just totally depends on the person. Me personally, I've just loved kind of being a community service pup. So I've never had an owner partner. I just kind of like to be that, almost like if there was a big party of people, I'm kind of like the house dog, or I just like to go up to everybody, kind of maybe beg for snacks. But, you know, I'm not owned by anyone. It's not.
So you have get-togethers with other pup players?
Yes. In LA, we're very fortunate to have a very rich community. So at different bars and gatherings, there's ways that people congregate and come together to kind of just be on the understanding level. There's so many different types of hoods. So there was like the hood that I was wearing earlier. There's many different styles. Some people love the anonymity of it. They just really want to get into that headspace where nobody knows who they are outside of a bar space, and that's awesome.
So they keep the face covering on.
Right, yeah. And I think, and that's beautiful because, we have to be real that still a lot of this alternative expression of sexuality can put some people at risk. There's a lot of people that say, like, if they work in like very, very conservative industries or conservative families, sees this as something so weird and deviant and dangerous that like maybe they're not safe. Now, obviously, this is gross, like way out there, gross overgeneralization, but people have to meet themselves where they're comfortable.
Now, your earlier comparison of comparing this to an actor on a stage, what's the difference?
Exactly. So for me, when I do pup play, it's just like another beautiful hobby of mine. So say like if somebody really loves the LA Dodgers and they love getting out on Dodger blue and they love going to the games and they're just crazy fan and they have little favorite players, they're probably not in that outfit all the time. They have a job, they have, RuPaul famously said, like, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. These are all costumes, different costumes. And so I don't live 24/7 doing this. It's a joy practice. I love bicycling. I do fire spinning. I go to Burning Man events. I love how we as humans just creatively can dress and take on a whole different persona. So it's a different way to spark deep conversations with people. And I mean, look at nature documentaries. If all the animals in the world were all colored the same and dressed the same, it'd be so boring. But whenever you think you might be too weird, just watch like a deep sea documentary and see the things that come out of the water. And you're like, I haven't even begun to be weird. I'm just getting started. I'm just going to take notes from the things that come out of the deep and be like, oh man, I could never be that weird. But
you have a job?
I do.
You have a fairly conventional life outside of this?
I do, yes. I went to college. I have a BA in communications. I was a newspaper journalist for many years. What actually really helped me being interested in communications and journalism was I feel like animals raised me in a lot of ways. Like I started understanding energy and how people use their body language. I'm like, okay, I understand that. But the understanding how to deeply relate with people, being able to interview so many different people in very small towns across Georgia was like, oh, wow, okay. It actually, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what type of job title you have or how much money you have, if you're currently experiencing homelessness, if you're currently the mayor, or there's a deep energy within us all that we really just want to be feeling safe. We want to be accepted. We want to be celebrated. We want to be validated by people. And when I kind of started learning that, especially in my early 20s, before I learned about kink, before I knew anything, that I was like, there's something really soft and special about this, that it's easy for people to forget when we get in our little bubble of like, this is my job title, this is my name, this is what I do, I can't deviate outside this bubble. It's like, you still can. That energy that we have of, this is who I am, it's not defined by our name, by our job title. We're much larger than that in the cosmos. And so I can get very philosophical about pup play.
Well, Kieran, what was your childhood like? How'd you grow up?
Well, when an egg meets a sperm.
After that?
Yes, after that. So being interested in stories, I think about my foundational patterning of my childhood a lot. So I want to preface this by saying I have so much immense respect for parents and those who raise children. It is not an easy job, especially if it's like your first child. Everybody's learning as they go. So even though I don't have a child myself, I'm coming through a point in therapy where I want to be honest about what I remember going through and experiencing, but I'm also trying to come from a kind, compassionate place where I'm not judging people for doing it right or wrong, because that's not the energy in which I want to cultivate going forward. So that being said, I'm 36 years old. I was born in just north of Dallas, Texas. Parents are from the Northeast, so I'm a little bit of a mix between Northern and Southern sensibilities. And my childhood, I'm an only child, and I believe that my parents, I'm very grateful for the physical stability I had. Always had food on the table, always had a roof over my head. I'm so grateful for that. But I also realized that I grew up in a lot of emotional instability. There was an immense amount of passive aggressiveness, screaming, yelling, threats. And I think that's probably what caused me to be a very quiet, introverted kid for so long. But I've just kind of learned of like, again, somebody can actually be very violent and angry and actually still be doing the best that they can within the knowledge that they have. And so I love my parents very dearly, but and I'm grateful for what I had, but I'm just now kind of realizing now in my 30s going through therapy, until I at college for a while, but when I finally moved back and I moved out when I was 27, I was walking on eggshells really for like 27 years. I never knew if like I'm 5 or 6 years old, I would leave a cup out and my dad would just break into screaming, demeaning at me of like, you're always going to mess up. Nobody's ever going to want to hire you. You're never going to do anything right. And when you hear that from a young age, you can't reason of, oh, my parent is having an emotional like flashback transgression probably to their own childhood. No, like as children, we absorb everything. And there's a very strong narrative in me that I have to battle every day that has that internal monologue of, I'm always doing something wrong. There's always something wrong with me. And that probably led to a lot of my anxiety and depression. And with an important part of my pup play too is, yes, being an emotional support pup player, but I also call it being a guard dog. And being a protective guard dog about people, it really has foundations. So when I was 5 years old, the house of my great-grandmother was being renovated. And my family had hired a crew of people to help renovate the house during the day, and we were staying in the house. And I was with a family member. We were staying in the house overnight. And for whatever God knows reason, two of the guys came back at night. They cut the power to the house. They cut the phone line. They broke in. And they raped my family member in front of me when I was 5 years old. And I remember screaming at the foot of the bed and screaming for a long time. And what I'm realizing is it's been now 31 years, and I think about that every single day. I replay that in my head every single day. And I'm very proud of my family member for not only surviving, But God knows what they had to do and what they were thinking to protect me, because they probably didn't know what these guys were going to do possibly to me. When they left, they stole our car and they torched it down the road. And so one of my earliest memories from childhood was going into the police station. They brought our charred car in, and I had a little beanie animal named Pumphrey. It was like a little leopard, and I had a plastic bangle around it. And it was like my best friend. And it was charred in the back of the car. And I just remembered like the smell of charred car, and I picked up Pumphrey, and he just fell in two, and all the beans just fell everywhere. And I also think about that every single day. And I think why this is so foundational to me, even as like a young child, a police officer came to me and was like, "You did so good for screaming so much, because they probably left a lot sooner than they wanted to." And, you know, I'm not angry at the officer for saying that. You know, what do you say to a 5-year-old that just went through something horrifically traumatic? And, but I think in this small way, it laid a point of, I know you can't do anything at 5 years old to protect much of it. You're just trying to survive. But within seeing such like a close focus that I would have with dogs growing up, that I was like, there's some dogs that are protectors. They protect their human. I want to be able to do that. Like, what if we had a dog that could have been a protector, that could have been there? What would that look like? What would it look like if I embodied this energy? If I grow an awareness, if I learn how to read people, that I could possibly help someone to avoid a situation like this. So that's a burning core memory, and also like a trauma point where I'm like, yes, it happened, but what I've loved learning in the last couple of years is trauma isn't what happened to us, it's what we made it mean because of it. So I can't change what happened in the past, but I can change my relationship to it. So it's made me very intensely interested in human psychology. Now, the two men that did this, they were children once. They were 5 years old once. What happened to them in their life that caused their humanity and their psyche to be twisted in a way in which they thought this was a valid idea to do? Now, those two men were caught, and there was a trial. One day I would actually really like to know their names. I'd really like to be able to actually meet and talk with them one day. I don't know their names, and maybe that's one day for me to find and discover more. But it's made me deeply interested in the nature of trauma. All of us experience either, big T or little t traumas. That was obviously a big T trauma for me. But how do we, when we're born into the world as pups or humans, we absorb everything around us. We're just, the environment shapes us. And if we were all raised in validating, safe, nurturing ways, why would the psyche go to a place that would harm somebody? Because somebody doing that is not doing themselves any favor. There's something deeply off and wrong. They're in horrific pain. And what I've learned is too, more often than not, they're recreating a pain that somebody did to them. They were taken advantage of at some young ages. So in their desperate attempt to feel some type of control in the world, they become their own abuser, and they abuse other people. And this is how intergenerational trauma happens. It's not because they were born bad people. something so horrific once or several times happens that actually it becomes this very twisted coping mechanism for them. They're just trying to feel normal. And I would actually argue this happens at the same time with people who struggle with addiction. I have a lot of addiction in my family, pills, alcohol. I'm approaching 5 years of alcohol sobriety myself. And what's helped me just find normality in pup play, but also just in life is it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. And so when I'm in these spaces in pup play, in queer spaces, in kink parties, yes, people are dressed up fabulously and they look great in their leathers and we're all very sexy, mysterious. But I think life has shaped me and cultivated my energy in a way where I'm the emotion. I mean, there can be several, but I'm an emotional support pup in my community. So people know that if they're struggling with something, I'm a person they can go to feel heard. Now, that doesn't mean I still have my own work to do, my own traumas, and sometimes I mess up. Sometimes I'll say something that is callous or not helpful. It doesn't mean that I'm holier than thou than anyone else. But I just try to work of again, what's my story? How do I own it? How can I be accountable? How can I be the best person that I can be? And then again, I look to the spirit of the dog. When I just get in my head and I'm overthinking everything, go down to basics. Are you facing someone? Are you giving them your heart and attention? A dog can be one of the absolute best therapists in the world just by being around. They don't have to say anything. So sometimes what we just want as humans is just somebody to just be with us, to sit with us in our pain. And one of my life goals is to become a therapist. I want to become a marriage and family therapist. I want to become a part of a solution of help, not fixing people, because nobody can fix someone else and do it for it. But if you're honest and authentic with the stories that shaped you and what you've learned along the way, and you can help talk to people about patterning and help remind people of their own inherent power to reconnect to themselves, I think that's just absolutely revolutionary. And that's a universal connection power outside of, you never have to put on a costume. You could wear a white polo and khakis for the rest of your life, and you're still just as beautifully connected and powerful as anyone else. It's not a popularity contest, no matter how fancy we look. So that's what I love about pup play and how it teaches me. And pup play teaches me to be a better human. It really does.
What would you say, Kieran, is the most interesting lesson that we learn from dogs, or that you've learned?
Dogs are very tied to their intuition. So humans, yes, for all our fancy development in upper cognitive development in our language, unfortunately, our brains can also talk to us. So when we're born, we're purely intuition. We can't hide our emotions. Like, try to tell a 2-year-old child to reason out of what they're feeling. Ain't gonna happen. Dogs, in a way, are like this as well. They're purely tied in to the community. If they get a bad vibe about someone, you're not talking the dog out of that vibe. They're gonna bark, they're gonna keep their distance. Dogs intuitively feel safe around other people. We have that same intuitive sense in us as people, but oftentimes, because of trauma or our big brains, we'll talk ourselves out of it, but we end up paying the price. How many times have you had a feeling that I'm not feeling quite right about it, but I'll do it anyway, and then you regret it? That's because of a pattern that you learned in childhood in which you weren't safe and you weren't validated, so you had to suppress that. Dogs remind us in a way that we don't have to suppress that. We can be authentic and true to ourselves. And a seminal person that, it's funny, not in the kink world, but Dr. Gabor Mate, who speaks beautifully eloquent about the nature of trauma, human development, has so inspired me to look at the world differently like that. So it's not really a kink counselor, but I would say a lot of people who do kink and pup play are so curious about just like the nature of themselves that they want to get deep into relationship with people and communications to get really, ultimately it's about reconnecting to ourselves through being open with other people. And dogs are the most perfect example of that. They just want love. They are love. And I think they remind us that really at our core, no matter how many flaws that we've picked up, flaws that we think we have, that we've picked up along the way, they remind us that we're also love. And that's what I want to embody in the world. And I'm grateful for everyone who's also shined the light with me when I get sad and I'm like a sad puppy. My community, they pick me up and they remind me of that. And when I'm just around dogs, it's just like happy ruffle on the head and I'm like, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And that's what I love.
Beautiful. All right. Kieran, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. And we'll love ourselves and we'll go out and love the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.